It is about 8:35, 8:38 p.m. And welcome to week number four. I almost said 5, but that'd cause a lot of people to faint. They'll say, "What happened to 4?" But no, this is week 4. And I always remind my students at week 4 that any assignments that have not previously been submitted from weeks 1 to 3, with the exception of discussion posts. Discussion posts, you can't do those after the period ends, but I accept weeks 1 to 3, um, but unless there's extenuating circumstances, they're going to lose a whole bunch of points. So you'll get minimum points. And so anyway, the point of the matter is that by the end of Sunday, we will start week 5. And when we start week 5, no more assignments will be accepted at all from 1 to 3. So I always encourage students to get them in. But again, like I said again, if you submit week 1 and week 2, technically you're past the 7-day point. But I need to know the reason why they weren't done. And as I said, operate on extenuating circumstances. So we shall see what's going on here. So let's start with me sharing my screen for this week. And here we go. I'm going to enter the student preview mode. Okay. So let's move that one. And so here are the emails that I've sent out to all course members that you have seen, including Senate Bill 3023, which has to do with deflection. And we're going to touch on that a little bit tonight. So I'll make sure that we talk about that. Okay, let me pull up my copy of it so I'll have it. Oh, there it is. All right. So you should have that by now and should have had a chance to take a look at that. So now let's look at the assignments for this week. You already have the PowerPoints for week 4. So you have the discussion assignment. We have your written assignment, your quiz, and then your live classroom lecture. So it's pretty much the same each week for this class. Okay. So let's talk about week 4's discussion assignment, which the initial post was due last night, and it has to do with forfeiture. And you follow these directions, read these. Now, read these points about forfeiture. And for this week, you're going to conduct research to learn about arguments in support and against seizure and forfeiture of assets and property associated with drug crimes. And then review also, you're going to look at this scenario. This is a direct scenario that you're going to use for your post. This is information up here that you want to use, of course. And then you're going to, for your first post, identify 2 arguments in support of forfeiture programs and identify the property or items you believe can be lawfully forfeited in connection with Mary's illegal drug activity. And then tell me what factors that you considered, and should the forfeiture program for drug dealer related assets be limited, eliminated, or expanded. And then your reply post respond to a student with different point of view regarding forfeiture programs. It says include proper citations. My policy on that. Citations are welcome, but I'm not requiring them for the discussion assignments in this course. All right. So of course you post your initial response, and then the initial response again was due last night, and then your reply post is due by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard. So next, let's take a look at the assignment. So again, I remind students, make sure that you follow the requirements in the rubric. Very important that you use the scenario involving Dave's life circumstances. Few of you have written assignments that were pretty good, but you did not utilize the information from the scenario that I encouraged you to download during week 1, and recognize that you're going to be using that for each of your written assignments in this course. All right. And when you read the instructions, it explains why. Describe the origin and development of international drug cartels involving the manufacture, sale, and distribution of illegal drugs. So you're going to do some research on drug cartels, identify the connection to drug cartels to Dave's scenario. So it's important that you make sure that you do that. And don't do it briefly. Don't throw me a sentence or two in there. Break it down. Identify current interdiction policies and legislative efforts to reduce and prevent manufacture, sale, and distribution of illegal drugs. Compare how these interdiction policies and legislative efforts are similar and different for gangs, and how they affect organized crime, syndicates, and international cartels. Provide an example of an interdiction policy or a legislative effort for gangs, organized crime, and international cartels. Now, the specifics. It says at least one credible source as an APA formatted reference. Well, you know my policy on that. The more credible sources you provide, the better your paper will be. I don't know why they said at least one, because of the fact that your statements in your paper, throughout your paper, especially since this is going to be a minimum of a 2-page paper, to have one citation in it is not very good, because of the fact that that means then I don't know where you got the information that you utilized to write the rest of your paper. So it is something that I've talked to them about, saying that they should not say at least one, they should say include credible sources. Now, again, credible sources, another way of saying credible sources is what we already know is a very important part of APA, and that is citations. Citations in the body of the paper. And those of you who've had me for more than one course know that I require citations to be provided throughout the body of the paper, because again, they support your statements, and so it's important that you do that. So don't, as I tell my students, don't get too comfortable with the I'm looking for something. Okay. Don't get too comfortable with that one statement, that one citation. Okay. So, all right. Okay. So make sure that you satisfy all those requirements. Um, the things that um, that the law prohibits involving drugs and how they affect gangs, organized crime, syndicates, and cartels. 2 to 3 pages. A Word document, students. Do not submit to me a PDF. Very important, because if you submit a Word document, you're going to get a 0. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go over the rubric when I get to the module in just a minute. All right. And then after that, you have your quiz. I won't click on that because if it does, it's going to start showing the questions, and I don't want that on the recording. So you shouldn't have an advanced look at the quiz, because you should know that once you start the quiz, that what's going to happen is that you're going to discover that um, it's timed and you can't pause it. You already know that. All right. And did you get one shot at it? One shot at it. Those of you who took um, Introduction to Corrections in the 5.5 course had a break there because you had 3 times to take the quiz within the week, but not here. And then, of course, you know that is due on Sunday. And then your live classroom word or phrase that you have an advantage when you come to the live lectures. You can get that out of the way right away. So you got 3 things that are due on Sunday: the assignment, the quiz, and the live classroom lecture. Your reply post is due the day before that on the 5th. All right. So now let's go back here. Let's take a look at the course calendar. And you see the month view. That's my favorite view. And you see where we are today. Live lecture. Initial post due yesterday. Reply post due Saturday. And then the assignments I told you that are due Sunday the 6th. Notice this, that once we start next week, the following week, the course ends. It ends on the 18th. That is the last day of class. I say it all the time. It is the last day of class. And all assignments are due at that particular time. All right. So let's say if you look at the course ends on the 18th, and if you were to scroll all the way down, you see the things that are due: your written assignment, your reply post, and also your final exam will be due. Then your live lecture phrase. So all of those are due at that particular time. So you want to make sure. All right. That's why when you look at the month view and you see the 18th, it says 2 more. I showed you what those 2 more were. The exam is one of them. All right. So no confusion about when the course ends. Everybody should be on board about when that happens. So now let's go back. And before we go to the announcements, I want to show you, whoops, wrong one. Let's close that one up. Let's do this one. Okay, 4. You could see the written assignment that I already showed you. And here is the rubric itself. And you can see for each of these, the requirements for each of the sections, each one of them. And to get your points, if you open it up, this is what you need to do. You don't want to be at limited. You don't want to be at competence or proficiency. You want to be at mastery for each of the sections. Very, very, very important. Any questions about the assignment? Oh, and by the way, a cover page and a reference page. Any questions about that? Okay, so 2 pages, make sure. Very, very, very important that 2 pages are included. So now let's look at your announcement, your week 4 announcement. Let's move that down there. Drug-related criminal activity and law enforcement perspective. And chapters 6 and 7 of the textbook, along with the accompanying PowerPoints that I previously sent you, deal with combating drug trafficking organizations. That's what DTOs are, drug trafficking organizations, and the law enforcement response to the heroin epidemic. The lecture is taking place right now. The discussion assignment, I already discussed forfeiture. Again, the initial post was due yesterday and the reply post due Saturday. No one should be confused about due dates because I talk about them all throughout the beginning of the lecture. Finally, complete the written assignment, policies to reduce and prevent drug-related crime. I just went over that a couple of times. And the quiz, I talked about that. And all those are due this Sunday. Complete the student survey, and then encouraging you to continue to be strong and finish strong. So stay strong for the second half of the course. And my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. Those of you who've been in previous classes should know what that is because it is actually included here in the announcements. Now, in case you forgot it, you can just click on it and then it opens it up. And I'm not going to go to it, but it's something that tells you about me, so that if you clicked on it, it's an hour and about 3.5 minutes, and it tells you quite a bit about your professor, so that you will be able to see where I'm coming from a lot of times, see where I stand the way that I do. Okay. So that's that. So now I want to get out of the student mode. So I'm going to close that one. Then I'll open it back up again. So now I'm no longer in student mode. And if you wanted to know how to reach me, you should have my phone number already, but just in case, for your information, if you go over to this section, Tools, and you click on the syllabus, and you will see you can text me, email me, or call me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. As it says, I mean it. A lot of students, though, will text me, but it says try not to email me if it's something important that you want me to do as far as your assignments are concerned. You have an issue or something. It's always good to text me or call me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day, and then that's the phone number right there. And this is a reminder about research required, that you'll lose 2 points. and all written assignments should be in APA. And then, of course, I mentioned the cover page as well. Very, very, very important. Okay. So now let's go to week 4, and let's talk about this topic. So we have 2 sections we're going to talk about. So be aware that one of the things that's involved here is, let's move my picture down there and move that one up there, is that drugs are trafficked all over the world, but primarily from China and also Mexico. And they have their organized networks where they work together with organizations here in the country to distribute their drugs, heroin and opium, and then what happens is that those who distribute these drugs also cut them and add to them things like fentanyl to make using prescription drugs that are included and caffeine. Think about this. This is, if you take opium and heroin, there's a good chance that you're going to have some caffeine. I always mess that word up. Caffeine in your body. Think about what it is. It's a sedative used for large animals like elephants, rhino, and things like that. And so the drug is not pure. And actually, if it's pure, it could probably make you sick or kill you anyway. But think about ingesting that with some of these chemicals that I'm going to be talking about that are in the put in there to cut it. When I say cut it, put it in there so that it, you know, has a larger portion to share out. It's kind of like liquidating something to make it stretch, adding liquids to it. And so people find themselves overdosing because they're not aware of these substances. And so that's part of the issue that people find themselves dying from. And so there's an article here that you can take time to read regarding the trafficking of fentanyl from China. And you'll find out how many people die from overdoses and that it contributes to the deaths and the opioid addiction crisis that we have in our country. So take time to read that. But be aware of the fact that these drugs are smuggled in the United States. And guess what? It is not the wall that they come over. There's people who believe that that's the biggest portion, but these actually come through ports of entry. And so they come in from Mexico, and because there are what we call corrupt criminal justice officials or law enforcement officials or border patrol people in Mexico and in the United States, the operation is able to get their product into the United States. And there are many cartels that control that, such as Sinaloa cartel, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, the Juarez cartel, the Gulf cartel, the Los Zetas cartel, La Familia and Mitran Labor Organization. And there is El Chapo. I forgot the name of his organization. He's in jail here in the United States, but his son is operating their cartel at the current time. I think his wife also has some um, um, operation responsibility for it as well. the point of the matter is that because of greed, because of money, um, people find themselves um, allowing this stuff to come into the country. And so that's why it is important that people understand that with those kind of organizations, um, that that's how they get it in. Of course, once they get it in, then there are other individuals who distribute it. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, who they utilize as their so-called foot soldiers or marketeers. And so anyway, the point of the matter is that because of this, there's also present a lot of killings, guns, weapons, individuals. You see violent killings. There have been instances where we notice that when somebody is killed execution style, generally it has something to do with drugs, organized crime, but drugs is in the mix somewhere. And so we have agencies in the United States that are designed to counteract these cartels and these illegal border patrol people, such as the DEA is the one that's primarily in charge. And the DEA is not just here in the United States, but throughout these countries all over the world. And they work locally, work together with the organizations, or rather the organizations, the drug enforcement agencies in the jurisdictions where they are. And their goal is to try to throw a monkey wrench into the drug trafficking organizations, and be able to slow down or stop the drugs. And so they formalize what they call a task force, and it says, which allow officers from many jurisdictions to work together to combat DTOs. Okay. Law enforcement officers um, um, have to work together, and oftentimes they are able to infiltrate uh, DTOs by using actually individuals that they busted or caught, and turn them into informants. Now that's a tricky business though, being an informant, because oftentimes if the organization knows that you're an informant, not only are you in danger, but your family could also be in danger as well. And that's one of the issues that deal with informants. So what they have to do in those situations pretty much is hide those people out, protect their families as well. But there are undercover officers who pose as purchasers of drugs, and dealing with in by bus. I've dealt with some of those personally, not on the federal level or the state level, but in the local level in the town where I was the village attorney slash prosecutor, and police officer and investigator, where I participated in drug raids. And what we did was we would find out where the drugs were, and we would attempt to get um, warrants to search, and then we would proceed like SWAT, like you've seen, and we would proceed like Cops, if you've seen that TV show. And I remember I have pictures somewhere stored away of me wearing my White Sox jacket and my White Sox cap backwards. I had my bulletproof vest, jeans, my tennis shoes, and all of that. And I had my what we call my Glock. That was my handgun that I utilized at that time. But anyway, so we worked together with other organizations. I worked with the county and the state at that time of Illinois, County of Cook and state of Illinois. So these organizations from all law enforcement levels seek to combat that. In addition to the DEA, there is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, that are operated, because I already told you there's violence involved. And so the ATF uh, idea is to deal with the uh, weapons, because the weapons are utilized to protect the cartel's property, the drugs, that is. And so the ATF obtains uh, the ability to take firearms and weapons that are used by cartels. And then we have what was created in 2011, the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. And the Department of Homeland Security operates throughout the country and the U.S. to watch out for the borders, and they joined the Border Patrol. And so the Homeland Security responsibility is to cut off the flow from Mexico to the U.S. and illegal shipments and money that cross the border. Where there's drugs, there's guns, and there's money. Those three all go together. Large amounts of cash, and then large caches. Cash meaning SCASH, money, and CACH ES, cache of weapons, large bundles of weapons, and they're usually automatic, semi-automatic weapons. And so the heroin is one of the big items that's shipped from Mexico to United States. And so you have the Border Patrol agents working within the Department of Homeland Security, and they stop vehicles and conduct searches at the border. And then once you get into the state patrol troopers or state police conduct interdiction efforts to identify drug trafficking and shipments across the country that go from state to state. And then the local police investigate users at the local level. I was telling you about my experience regarding that. So all of those organizations seek to work together to try to stop the drugs. Now, let me get to your question. How will the new up and coming bills and laws that will legalize? Well, it doesn't legalize personal use of narcotics. What drug are you talking about legalizing? I know you're talking about marijuana, right? Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about marijuana legalization, right? Well, all Schedule One drugs are not going to be legalized in that bill. Opium, for example, is not going to. I mean, heroin is not going to be legalized, or any of those drugs. The thing from Schedule One that they're talking about legalizing primarily is marijuana. That's it. That's it. Um, I don't. I'm not familiar with a bill that's going to legalize all of the drugs in Illinois. But here's what I want to tell you. Even with marijuana being removed from Schedule One drugs, the reason is so that they can, get state revenues for that. And it's not directly to stop illegal trafficking, because that's going to be their competitor, but it is there to get the revenue for the state itself. But here's my point: legal or not, those drugs, including marijuana, are dangerous to the health and welfare of the people of the state. I don't care how they legalize it. There's been effects that marijuana, of course, has brought out that use it as what we call a gateway drug. You know what a gateway drug is? You know, you ever heard that term gateway drug? Well, yeah, it opens the door or introduces you to another drug. So usually it's like the thing that gets you hooked and leads you into, because here's the thing that you need to be aware is that the marijuana that's sold at the dispensaries are not cut with anything. But remember, the marijuana that is out there on the streets contains all kinds of things that I've talked about in our previous lecture that they use to cut that, like paint thinner and uh, um, cough syrup and all kinds of things that are utilized that are sold across the counter. So, the plan is not to, um, how should I say, cut off the distribution and sales so much with the legalization, though that is part of it. But the biggest part is that the government doesn't receive any income from the sale of illegal drugs. And the way that they get the sources of income pretty much is from what we talked about in the discussion post this week, drug forfeitures, where property is seized and things of that nature. So don't get too caught up um, on how that is going to affect um, any of the issues, because you're going to hear me say over and over, and this is a map of the drug cartel. You're going to hear me say over and over and over that this is a part of the war on drugs that we're talking about here in this section. And you already know my statement because I talked about it last week about my position on the war on drugs. We're fighting with a short stick, and that the best way to try to ameliorate drug distribution is the same way that Walmart and Amazon has driven other organizations out of business, is because they did it better. And so uh, that's the same thing. And then there were people who wouldn't buy that way, or they'd start to buy online. So why am I using those examples? I'm using this. If you get people cured of drugs, if you get people from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock on my clock and have them to operate there uh, by making sure they have adequate treatment to help them continuously. And I'm not talking about methadone. I'm talking about going through the actual habit of kicking drugs. Then in that case, there are no customers. So they end up like these other stores that end up going out of business. You get my drift and my point. If you take away the customers, the business will suffer. I don't know too many people who use drugs that were forced to use drugs by any other way. The fact that they tried it and then they got hooked on it. In other words, what I'm saying, if you don't have the customers, then the drug organizations are diminished. I'm not to say they go away altogether, but that's the approach that it's going to take. Yeah, you're going to play cat and mouse with these methods I'm talking about, combating DTOs, utilizing these various agencies such as DEA and the ATF and Homeland Security. But if a person is not using the drugs, then there's nobody to buy them. So that's the approach to try to not dry it up, but to slow it up. To dry it up is get the customers not interested in it, and that's getting them helped. Okay, that's why I believe in rehabilitation. So now let's talk about what law enforcement has done in response. And so what we have recognized and learning in law enforcement is that because of the epidemic that's involved with these different drugs and uh, people dying from them, um, law enforcement has reached the stage now where what we try to do is individuals who utilize the heroin, which is not pure, but it's laced with, as I was talking about, caffeine, tanil, and heroin addicts um, inject the heroin that has other items in them that cause their death. So now law enforcement and first responders are armed with what we call Narcan. And Narcan is a drug that's supposed to arrest the, um, the overdose or to stop it. And Narcan is just one name for Noxalone, that was used and prescribed and to try to uh, turn away the deadly results of ingesting opioids and heroin and things of that nature. So it blocks the effects of the opioids and reverses the overdose symptoms. And it is given by injection and now nasally. And it's a very expensive item. And sometimes though, they don't, people don't come in time. The law enforcement people or the first responders don't arrive in time, and the person is dead. So it's kind of like, as they say, a drug that's supposed to help bring back the dead. Well, they didn't really die. So let's start back with 215. The FDA approved the nasal Noxalone that I was talking about. And so that made it easier so that you'd put it in each nostril. And it's easier than trying to shoot somebody up with a needle. And so it is something that is cutting into it. But again, it's it's there to try to save the lives of people. It's there to do that. Now, this legislation, Senate Bill 3023, is, and we're going to talk about more of this next week, but I'm mentioning it to you right now, is what we call deflection. And you should have a copy of this. And it deals with, it's called the Community Law Enforcement Partnership for Deflection and Substance Use. And what happens is that when a person is caught with drugs, drug paraphernalia, rather than to lock those individuals up, these programs allow law enforcement to refer them for treatment. And so they've partnered with organizations throughout the state of Illinois. And it also provided what we call a Good Samaritan protection. What Good Samaritan protection does is to protect individuals who dispense Noxalone from being sued. So what it says in the legislation, it protects police and emergency responders regard use of opioid overdose antidote Noxalone and provides immunity from lawsuits for organizations who in good faith use this to help people if they die, so that somebody can't say, oh, they would have lived if, no, no. But the key thing about deflection is just what it says. If you look at the word deflect, it means to push in another direction. And so when people come into the police station and they admit that I got drugs and this, their idea, their role is not to write them up and charge them with a crime, but to try to get them to get help, because there are a number of issues, a number of problems that are involved with that. And so that's a new approach. You're going to see next week another program that Massachusetts had. I think they started theirs in 2015. Our program in Illinois became law, and it was in 2018 that this was brought about because of the tremendous number of opioid deaths that are taking place in the state. So take a look at that and be aware of that also. There is a book that I refer you to. It is called From Dope to Hope. This is in my hand. A man in recovery, Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan came to the Romeoville campus and spoke to us, and he actually gave me this book. And in the book, he details how he himself was a recovering addict, and then he ended up becoming a drug counselor. But one of his frustrations that he had, and it's in the book, is that he couldn't save his own son, who eventually overdosed from opioids. And so it was his son. His son's name was Nicholas James Hoban Ryan. And where he says in his dedication of his book, this book is dedicated to his son, and he says his name, I am sorry, I was not a father to you, I was a friend. If I could turn back time, trust me, I would. You are always with me, my son. You are the driving force for me each and every day. And he talks about the frustration that he had with not being able to help his son. The book is available on at Amazon. It's From Dope to Hope. Dope to Hope is the title of the book, A Man in Recovery, and it's by Tim Ryan. I've had a few people, students, who told me that they got the book. It's an easy read, but it shows pictures in here of the father and the son when they were younger, um, and it's pretty devastating when you sit down and read this in itself. Okay, so now I want to take a few minutes before we adjourn, and I want to share this short video called Chasing the Dragon. Now, there's a longer one that we're going to do next week, but this one is the law enforcement perspective of it. And so I'm going to open it up, and I think it's about 4 minutes, and I'm going to take off my headset. Hear it, and if it's not really very clear, it has yeah, it's 4 minutes. Let's see. There it goes. Let's put the closed caption on there. Okay. Happened there. I'm gonna close it up and open it up again. Let's do it again. Okay.
Prescription pills and opiates has definitely become an increasing problem that we see, and not only involving the crimes to investigate actual drug conversion, but it, involves other things too. People start committing other crimes when they start seeing, the the need that they have to get these drugs. I think the worst part of it is that it's starting at, you know, kids with a very young age, kids that are, you know, middle school even are starting to find out what these pills are, and they might think it's fun at first. And then, you know, you talk to them a year, 2 years later, and you realize it's a different story. I mean, so, you know, just the degree that people go to get these pills is insane. I mean, I've seen people that drive 7 hours one way every month each way. So that's a 14-hour round trip just to get these pills because, you know, so you need a job. You can't work your job anymore because all you care about is, you know, driving up to get these pills. And I mean, your life is over because all you can focus on is how do I get these drugs?
We've done search warrants in huge homes, multi-million-dollar houses, fancy cars, and search warrants in houses where there's no food and no refrigerators. I remember one individual subject, I arrested his mother and his father, and also arrested him. He was injecting OxyContin, as many as 35 a day, intravenously, and he was using creek water just out of the local stream because he was living out in the woods. Everybody thinks they pop a few pills, it's no big deal. You young kids out there, you better just be very, very aware of what's going on with these pills. You can get addicted with one pill, and for the rest of your life, it will absolutely ruin you. It doesn't discriminate against you're young or old, or you're black, or you're white, or you're male, or you're a female. I've arrested from 12 years old to 86 years old. I've arrested grandma and grandpa. I've arrested the young boy that takes the pills from his parents' cabinet and takes them to school and gives them to some other kids in school. When somebody gets sick, gets rushed to a hospital, and thank God doesn't die. I've worked probably at least 24 overdose deaths that are 100% related to prescription meds where it's too late, they're already dead.
A lot of students went down the road, a lot of young people go down the road of trying to drug for recreational purposes, and they don't understand the devastation that it has to their own life and the lives of their parents. I should add the victims of the crime include infants. We have had subjects who were pregnant women who gave birth to oxycodone, opiate addicted babies and infants. They even had to have the baby in jail. And it's a growing problem as well.
In a lot of overdoses, a lot of death. Scary thing is it's getting younger and younger. It used to be the heroin overdoses seemed like they were all adults. Lately, they've been getting younger and younger, low 20s, even into their high teens. I've talked to hundreds of heroin addicts or opiate addicts, and they all tell me the same thing. If they could do anything, one thing different, they never would have started in the first place. That's the one regret that they all have is that they started when they were young, and once you're an addict for life. And the best way to avoid that is just to never do it.
We're seeing a dramatic shift in how it's affecting the lives of young people. They're experimenting with friends at parties, and they think it's safe to take pills from the medicine cabinet or a friend. And during a 1 week period, we had 9 fatal overdoses in a 3 jurisdiction area. And over the Christmas holiday, I read 2 obituaries of people that I had arrested for prescription fraud and related offenses. Their parents buried them. They were young, 20-some years old.
So you can see, let me put this back in. You can see from this that this is a very serious issue. And if you couldn't hear very well in that, that's why they closed captions on it, but you can go back and look at it yourself. But it's a short version that came out in 2016, but next week we'll have a long version that lasts about an hour. So it's gonna about 40 minutes or so. So I'll be rushing through the lecture part so we can make sure we go over that. But when you look at this, you begin to see that the people who unfortunately have contact with these individuals and trying to save their lives using Narcan or Noxalone in general to try to arrest it, as one of the officers said earlier, the best thing to do is don't start with it. You see, the youth are really adversely being affected, but also they mentioned an 80-year-old person. So it knows no age limit, it knows no race, it knows no sex. It's just the point that's devastating um, to that individual and can take their life. Even if they end up getting saved, a lot of times what people will sometimes discover is that if they're saved by Noxawan, then what they will do is say, oh, here's a remedy, and go back again. And maybe the next time they won't be so fortunate. So the key thing is be aware that now law enforcement's role is also to try to operate the same way as um, medical people. Because as I said before, and I'll say it again, that drugs is a issue that is involved with individuals who find themselves in situations where they subject themselves to danger and ultimately um, will find themselves, unfortunately, overdosing at some point. So that's it for me for tonight. Um, any questions? Okay. All right. Well, so follow what I had discussed. And the key phrase that I'm going to give you, because of the hour, I'm not going to let you have you to guess, is Narcan. Give me that. Narcan. I'm not even going to tell you how to spell it because we talked about it in this last section and you can readily be able to get it. So give me that phrase or that word to get your points for week number 4. And I'll see you next uh, Wednesday with week 5 lectures. So in the meantime, stay safe and I'll see you next week. Good night. Thanks for coming also.